Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's absolutely packed in here. I've opened the door to let some air in. I know we've got extra chairs and people even sitting on stools and classroom chairs at the back of the room. So thank you so much for all turning up. And to those of you, I know we've got people online. This is why I'm talking to that tiny little thing there that is a camera. So if you're online, thank you very much for joining us. So I'm Nova Robinson, one of the curriculum consultants at Early Excellence. And what we're going to do for the next half an hour is I'm going to deliver a short input, just thinking about one or two things to do with this time of year. Then my colleague Claire is going to do the same. And for those of you online, what will happen is there'll be a kind of pause screen in between the two while we just swap over. For the rest of you, it's just a few minutes where you'll just be able to sit and join us. So hopefully there'll be lots of things that you can take away. At the end of those two sessions then, feel free to wander, those of you that are in the building. Of course, if you're online, not so easy, but Claire will talk to you about some of the ways that you can link to us online. So, spring. When we were asked to do this, it's kind of thinking about and pulling from the air something that really tunes us into this time of year. So spring, we've got, I suppose today is an ideal day for it because it's that lovely time of year where we start to think, thank goodness, it's lighter. I actually get to see my house in daylight sometimes in the morning, and when I come home, I might see my house in daylight. And there's that kind of optimism that comes, the feeling that we're moving away from the dark times. And it's also that lovely, joyful time in the classroom. We've got all the things, the life cycles, the baby animals, the young light, the getting outside more and more. So that really lovely time. And one of the things that I think it's really worth thinking about is the opportunity to kind of grab that curiosity that young children have. And we're so good at inspiring by bringing things in, sharing things with them. And in a way, deepen it and extend it so that we get more inquiry from it. So that we're thinking about more opportunity to, from very young children, teach them those early research skills. So it's moving beyond the being curious, because being curious is what they're going to be, and that's what we're really good at getting hold of. But in itself isn't going to be enough, because being curious provokes questions, and we need to be there to provide the answers, but also to provide the routes for children to find the answers themselves, so that they become inquirers, not just children who ask lots and lots of questions. That demands that we are also inquirers, because if we think about something like inquiry-based learning, it's so much more than just a subject to fit in, or this lesson I'm going to do inquiry. It kind of is about all of us, all the adults that work with the children and the attitude we have. It's this all-encompassing approach. And once we start thinking about it, it helps us find ways to widen experiences. So I've taken one thing, which you can probably guess, eggs. So I'm going to take one example and really think about what we can get from that, because there will be eggs in your classroom. There will be chocolate eggs, and for those of you here, some of those will be available at the end of the session, if you're quick enough to get to the front, because there aren't this many, I have to say. So if we start with eggs. Eggs, I guess when we plan them, and if I think about moving, because I moved from Key Stage 2, teaching a long time in Key Stage 2, to early years in Key Stage 1, all of a sudden, which was a bit shocking, to say the least. And one of the first things that happened was, got to the spring, and I was told, oh, your incubator's arriving on Monday. I said, what do you mean? And this was on the Friday. And on the Monday, this incubator duly arrived, full of eggs, and it was kind of, there you go. Off you go, plug it in over there, and we'll come back and collect them once they've hatched. And those chicks hatched a couple of days later. We all looked at them, they were beautiful, we held them, we did all of the stuff that you would do, that lovely wow stuff that we do with children, and it was amazing. But then at the end of that week, they were collected and they were taken away to, farm in Wales or something. And that was it. And it was a lovely period of time, and it was a lovely thing. But actually, first of all, if I'd known those eggs were coming, but secondly, if I had and I didn't really by that point had an early years head on me, I could have thought, you know what, we can get so much more from this, not only in terms of what they love and enjoy, but also the learning behaviours, the dispositions that we want from our children. And eggs have loads of symbolism. You know, there's loads of stories we can look at. So, you know, people used to be buried in ancient cultures with eggs in their hand or with eggs in the tomb. There's a story from an Aboriginal story that some of the birds were fighting and an egg got thrown, the yolk hit a piece of wood, exploded into flame, and that became the sun. And the world previously had been dark, but then the yolk became the sun. So there are lots of lovely stories around eggs to start off with, and we're always looking for story. But we take one example, another story I can remember, I don't know how many of you did, but when I was a child, and then I did it with my own children, whenever we had a boiled egg, you had to turn it over at the end and smash it when it was empty so that the witches couldn't sail away in it. I have no idea, but that apparently comes from European folklore. And then you've got a whole host of questions there. Well, how big are witches? Do eggshells float? Where would they go? What happened to broomsticks? You've got all of those things. But there are loads and loads of myths associated with eggs, which are a lovely thing to start with. So then we've got this, and I ordered this. And I see these eggs in classrooms an awful lot. And, you know, the children are waiting to see if it's a dragon or a dinosaur or whatever it's going to be that comes out of this egg. And in this case, it goes into water and a few days later. And I'm not for one moment saying don't ever do that. But what I am asking you to think about is, where's the inquiry for that? What questions can children ask beyond what's going to be in it? What sources of evidence can we provide for children to try and work out what's going to be in the egg? You know, how can they actually do any research and inquiry? It's a lovely thing, and it's great for tuning them in, for talking, for having all those conversations. But actually, there's inquiry associated with this. You know, what's it made of? Why does it dissolve if it's one that dissolves? Does the water turn green when it's dissolved? What's happened to this hard stuff? Can't see it in the water anymore. What's the thing inside it made of that means that dinosaur or dragon or whatever it is doesn't dissolve in water? So if you are doing this, look, it's about looking wider beyond it. And then we've got a real egg. Okay, this one's plastic. Pretend it's a real egg. There are so many things that you can do about eggs. What you can then say to children is, okay, this egg we're all really familiar with, but what about a quail egg? Or I went into a fairly posh supermarket, I have to say, by chance the other day, and they have all sorts of different eggs. You know, blue eggs, green eggs, duck eggs that are this big, quail egg that are tiny. And actually looking at those and then thinking about how do we then get children to investigate more. We've got amazing books. I would highly recommend that you look at these. But then it's thinking about, and I just printed these off really quickly, how do we give very young children, you know, early research skills? So it's thinking about, okay, can't have all the eggs in the classroom, but if you look at different sized eggs, you know, what are they? What could be in them? What size are they? Because if these are printed life size, that one's an emperor penguin's egg. And then you've got an ostrich egg, which you can see here, a real one there. And then thinking about, you know, giving them those, for example, and then giving them the actual size chick, in this case, that comes out of it. And actually with no text, you've got a whole opportunity there for inquiry. Well, hang on, what makes you think that that comes out of that one? You know, and there will be lots and lots of things. And then depending on the age of the child or the development of the child that you work with, the children you work with, when do you then introduce simple text? When do you give children, say in Key Stage 1, information that's written where it tells the children the size of the eggs, rather than providing them with the eggs? And then you've got other examples of actual size eggs. Yes, it's extinct. This is the egg that David Attenborough did his programme about. It's an elephant bird. And there's a whole programme where he talks about, he has the shell or a fossilised version of one of these. And we have so many rich resources we can tap into. So it's looking for those ways that we can encourage children to research. Ask a question. What's in the egg? You know, what's going to come out of the egg? How big is the egg? How many eggs? You know, some eggs are laid by seabirds on a cliff edge, not in a nest, and yet they don't roll off. You know, nice links there to 3D shapes and which ones roll and so on. And then if we look at eggs that aren't laid by birds, you know, which other animals lay eggs? You know, turtle eggs, green turtles' eggs are about this size, really easy to get hold of. They lay, this is, I don't know, 1 to 200 in a clutch. A clutch, 8 clutches in a season, that's 50 in there. So you've got loads, you know, you think about, well, there's maths in there, there's how much room they fill, you know, how many eggs can you fit in some of the different containers? So you've got loads of things to do with eggs. When you get to Easter, and I will make those available, 1 ostrich egg, how many Cadbury's cream eggs does that weigh the same as? An emperor's egg is the same weight as 13 of those, apparently. You know, so explore around that. Excuse me, I've got mini eggs, teeny tiny mini eggs. You know, I saw a photograph coincidentally on Twitter or something yesterday of a sunfish, which are massive, but the egg hatches into the little hatchling of the sunfish is like a couple of millimeters small. So there's lots of things. Well, it's not necessarily, small things don't necessarily stay small. Sometimes the smallest things become big creatures. So we've got all of those things around there, and you've got some lovely examples here. And then you've got the nests, of course. How do you make a nest? And again, A Nest is Noisy, an amazing book. How can you make a nest? How do birds make them? Again, because we've got so many resources we can access online, there are the birds that weave really intricate nests that hang from trees. There are nests that float. There are nests that are built underground. There are nests where they throw the animal that made it out. You know, there are all sorts of different things. There are nests built of mud or just scraped in the gravel so that the eggs then are camouflaged. There are eggs, some birds make them out of all sorts of rubbish, and the nests are about, you know, huge and stinking and rotting, made of all the things that they can find around them. So again, think of the experiments to do with, you know, all that lovely mud added to straw and all those different things, and how you can create, you know, the kinds of nests that house martins make so that they don't fall down and they don't dry out. So it's looking round that subject, I guess, and giving them a chance to explore, to question. Now, remembering as well that children's questioning, you know, at this age isn't brilliant. You know, a lot of this is going to have to be adult directed in terms of the questions, but also the questions that can be researched, that we can find the answer. It's not a case of saying to children, okay, go and find out. Go and look at a book, or go and take the iPad and find out how many eggs a turtle lays, for example. We are going to have to guide that process. But it's about putting in place the skills, the behaviours, the attitudes that children need to take with them. So this is a question that we can answer, and these are the kinds of sources of evidence that I can use. And it's looking, I guess, beyond the egg that's there for a few days, the incubator that's arrived. Do they know it's arriving? Is it plotted on a calendar? How many days till they hatch? Where's the incubator going to be plugged in? How do you know you've turned an egg over when it's the same all the way round? How do you prepare the brooder for when the chicks or the ducklings have hatched? You know, ducklings are amazing, especially as all the staff fight to be the one that it imprints on, the first one that hatches, so it follows them around the school. But then if you can keep them for longer, then you've got their experience in the water for the first time and all those lovely things. And again, it's the research. How do we feed them? How do we look after these animals because they haven't got their mother anymore? What would happen if they were on the farm or in the wild? You know, and you look for everything you can do around that, because if we're not careful, children have the same experience in nursery, in reception, in year 1 and sometimes year 2. You know, in each of those classrooms, say the incubators arrive, yes, they're lovely, yes, we write about them, but actually what are we giving the children beyond that? I did have quail one year. That was, I don't know if you watched The Last of Us, but it was like one particular episode of The Last of Us. There were 50 one night. By the time we came in the next morning, there was one, literally on top of quite a lot of others. And they all had to go to a farm in Wales very, very quickly. So I would be very careful about what you have, because that has lived with me for a very long time. So that's what I've got to say about that. Do help yourselves to these once Claire's done hers. They will, otherwise the staff will get all of them. So help yourself to those. So what we're going to do now, and thank you to those of you online as well, what we're going to do now for you online, there will be a pause holding screen up. And for the rest of you here, if you need to stretch your legs, that's fine. But all we're going to do is swap over. And Claire will talk about going outside, gardening, and avoiding the kind of, I guess it links to what I've been saying. You know that the production line of growing sunflower seeds, if we're not careful, where we get the pots that are the right size, we put the soil in, we call out one child and another to stick their seed in, then cover it up, and then it's actually thinking beyond that and thinking, hang on a minute, perhaps we could say to them, read the instructions or give them the instructions, which of those pots looks about the right size? Which seeds look like these? These are the sunflower seeds. What will those grow into? And looking beyond that feeling, and I completely get why we do it, because it's that feeling I've got to get through everything of, right, every child's planted a sunflower, every child's done this, every child's painted a sunflower, and it's that, because that's what we end up feeling that we have to do. But it's trying to slow down and think, okay, what are the learning opportunities beyond a sunflower in one pot that they were probably doing when they were 2, when they were 3, when they were 4, and so on. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you if you're online. It will just be a few minutes. And thank you to those in here, and we will swap over. Thank you, Simon.
Welcome back, everyone. We were just going to have a short break just there, just for people to stretch their legs and have a little catch up on the ideas that were shared. So I'm Claire, and we're going to be talking about the possibilities that planting and gardening can offer. There's a wide variety of opportunities that we can provide that are open-ended for our children to explore. So let's think about that. Let's think what we mean by those open-ended opportunities. Let's think about the importance it has on children's well-being. Let's take it back a few years. Do you remember that 1 hour of golden time we could have outside during lockdown, and we were craving that outdoor learning time? We were craving just to be able to get out for that 1 hour of exercise and walk. And actually there's been research recently that said that actually children having that outdoor experience and time is good for their well-being, their stress levels, fatigue, and actually we noticed that ourselves. When we were able to have that 1 hour of walking time or exercise time during lockdown, we really noticed the benefit that had for our own well-being and stress levels. We noticed that actually it was really beneficial for us to be able to get outside. So when we're looking at providing those opportunities, we need to think about also the experiences children have. There will be children that will arrive with experience with planting and gardening. Perhaps they've got grandparents or parents who have a garden, maybe an allotment, and they've had those experiences of getting out and digging in the soil, looking for worms, planting vegetables and seeds. But there will also be those children that haven't had those experiences. Perhaps they live in a flat, they haven't got a communal area to be able to plant, they haven't got a local garden they can walk around. But actually, we can use that to our advantage, because actually we can get those children collaborate together, to work together to share some of those experiences. And then if we think about the opportunities we have within our schools or settings, we may not have a garden area ourselves, but actually that won't restrict what we can do in terms of planting. There are opportunities to plant within borders or beds if we've got those in our gardens, but also in tyres, hanging baskets, or seed trays. So there's lots of opportunities that we can provide to be able to give children those opportunities to plant and grow. So let's look at the 7 areas of learning then, and where we can link some of those really open-ended and various opportunities to enable children to experience planting and growing, but covering the 7 areas of learning. So if we think about personal and social first of all, well, we've briefly touched on that. We've said how it can help our well-being and the levels of well-being with our children. We've spoke about it being an opportunity for children to be able to collaborate. But also it gives children an opportunity to self-regulate in a different environment. That can be challenging for some children to self-regulate when it's more open-ended and outside. But actually that's where we use that collaboration of children that do have those experiences. And then if we think about those emotional feelings the children would be having, they're often very different and exhibit very differently outside to what we know in the environment inside. But gardening will provide those opportunities for children to feel freer, to access an activity that doesn't require so much formality in terms of following instructions. It gives them opportunity to feel freer and experience that open-ended opportunity. Let's take a look at communication and language. Well, that in itself offers a wide variety of opportunities for children to have those back and forth exchanges with each other, sharing their own experiences or limited experiences, asking questions of each other, and that I wonder and I ponder moments. I wonder what these plants are going to grow into. I wonder what this vegetable might become. Actually, what's the difference between a seed and a bulb? So lots of I wonder moments for those children to explore. And then there's the opportunity to engage and learn about rich vocabulary. Some of our children might not have the vocabulary around planting and gardening. Some might not know what a seed or seedling is. Some might know what a root is. So actually it gives us that opportunity to teach that rich vocabulary. Let's look at physical development. So when we think of physical development, we might think first of all about using those fine motor control and developing that skill with using hand tools. We have some examples here. But one point to note is actually if we want to give children rich learning experiences, we need to provide them with the right tools. Imagine going into that exciting area where you're going to dig and plant and being given a really flimsy plastic tool that actually you can't dig a hole for. What we need to provide is really sturdy, strong, real life tools for our children to experience what it's really like to be able to dig a hole in that soil, particularly if we're digging when it might be colder weather and the soil's slightly frozen, although I'm not sure, gardeners will tell me that we shouldn't be planting when it's frozen soil, I'm sure. No expert myself in planting. But again, it's by providing those really rich tools and resources for our children to gain those real life experiences. And then let's think about larger tools we can use. Giving children rakes, for instance, we've got some examples over here, giving them rakes and those spades where they can put their foot on. Imagine all those core strength and skills they'll be getting, those gross motor muscles they'll be using, providing a lot more muscle development for them. And then if we think about resources such as a wheelbarrow, imagine the skill children need to develop having a wheelbarrow, using the gross motor skills to load the wheelbarrow with their seeds, their tools, their bulbs, their variety of tools they're using, and then that carefully picking it up and pivoting on the wheel. That takes, again, a lot of core strength and muscle skill for those children to be able to balance that and then negotiate a space, often around other equipment that might be outside. So again, physical development is a wide variety of opportunities that we can provide for them, that they will develop those wide range of skills. Let's choose another area. So let's choose mathematics. Now, again, pointing out with mathematics, we want to provide children with real-life opportunities to embed skill. Actually, gardening and planting offers that, because we're using a range of mathematical skills that they can directly embed through a real-life opportunity. So, for instance, if we take a seed packet and we look on the seed packet or a bulb packet, it often tells us how far apart that we need to plant. Actually, what does that look like? I often get that wrong when I'm planting. I put bulbs together and realise actually when they grow up they're going to be too tightly packed. But actually exploring that with the children, looking at the space and estimating, have we got enough space to plant this packet of 30 bulbs? Do we need a larger space? Will we need less? Opportunities then, if your children are ready, is to measure. How deep do we need to plant the bulbs? How far apart? Giving those opportunities to challenge and extend their mathematical learning. Then, of course, when plants grow, we have the opportunity, I'm sure we've all done it, with growing sunflowers, measuring how tall they grow. And children understanding that concept of time, that actually they're not going to come back to it the next day and it's grown already. And that's where we can look carefully about what bulbs and plants we might plant with the children to give them those differences in time so they can realise some things grow quicker. Cress, for instance, grows at a quicker rate. There might be some bulbs that you'll notice over a season that might grow. So it's providing them with an opportunity to come back to that learning. Let's look at another area of learning. So let's look at knowledge and understanding. So knowledge and understanding of the world really does lend itself to planting and gardening, because actually it's providing that scientific concept and skill, looking at how plants grow, what do they need? And that links back to that communication and language, that I wonder, how long does it take? If I come back to it tomorrow, would it have grown? What do I need to give these plants and bulbs to be able to grow? And actually, if I'm planting vegetables, what can I do with the vegetables? Can I use them for snack? Can I use them in a cooking opportunity for the children? So there's a wide variety of opportunities we can link to knowledge and understanding. And then there's that wider nature. Being at one with nature and in nature and understanding when we're planting, the things that we've planted around us or may have been there for many years, trees for example, actually looking at the concept of why they're there. What importance are they to us? I remember in one of my settings a child being fascinated by some bees on a plant, actually looking at the importance of those plants to bees. And actually, if we want honey, then actually we need these plants because we need the nectar and the pollen for the bees. Again, looking at birds, Birds not only need plants and the trees for obviously habitat in terms of nests, but also the berries that are on the trees that will provide a food source for them. So again, a wide range of opportunities for children to explore. Some of that might need more adult guidance. There's going to be children within our setting that would not have had those experiences and will need us to engage in those conversations and that sustained shared thinking with the children and drawing out those experiences and modelling that vocabulary for them. Let's look at literacy. So literacy we've already touched on in terms of the seed packet and reading it. And many of our children might not be able to read the seed packet or the bulb packet, but what they are doing is seeing us as readers as well. We're modelling that process to them. We're explaining the vocabulary to them. We're giving them opportunities to see print. And then if we look at writing, those opportunities to be able to provide mark making with labelling. I remember in lockdown, I was one of those who took on planting. I had time in my garden to get out. I just recently moved just before lockdown. My garden was full of brambles. But actually, I became a keen gardener and wanted to try things. But what I didn't do was label anything I put in my garden. So when it all started to come up, what did I have? Plant or weed? Who knows? So again, it's providing those opportunities for the children to have a go making labels on where they've planted. So actually they can come back to it and see what they've planted. And let's look at expressive arts and designs. I think here it really lends itself to those observational skills. Children really getting out and looking carefully at the plants they may have planted. Looking carefully at the patterns they might see on the leaves. Or for instance, if they're growing vegetables, seeing part, for instance, the carrots growing up. What they typically see as a carrot, they won't have often seen the green plants part of it. Actually looking carefully at the pattern. That might lend itself into then creative activities such as open painting or observational drawings. And then we can look at all our senses. Actually, imagine going into a garden where you've planted a range of herbs and you're running your fingers through those herbs. You're feeling the texture of them, the scent and aroma that's released. Children will become fascinated by the different scents and when some of those scents mix together. And then by planting herbs, that also then gives us the opportunity to use that, for instance, in our mud kitchen. Those children can then see that purpose of, I've planted the herbs, I can see the journey of them growing, and actually I can now use them in my mud kitchen. Or I could take them and use them in a baking activity, for example. I think the most important aspect here, though, is that we let the children guide this learning. Nova commented earlier about the production line. And yes, there's opportunities to model planting to the children and gardening. They might not have experienced some of that. They may need some of that modelled to them. But actually what we need to do is then hand it over to the children. We need to give those opportunities for open-ended play and exploration to get them to ask the questions and follow the instructions of others, enabling them to engage in collaboration and planting. And I think you'll find actually the children become quite expertise in it already. You'll find that they quickly learn those skills and are able to teach, normally us, a lot more than we think. So my advice was just give it a go. Try not to over-plan it. Try to allow enough time to explore and allow the children to explore. So I hope that gives you a few ideas of how gardening and planting can cover all areas of learning. Okay. Now what we're going to do is, if you're in the centre, we're now going to pause for you to have a look round the centre. So we have our environment set up for our early years and Key Stage 1. It will give you an opportunity to see some of the resources, for instance, here and in the classrooms, that can support some of those learning opportunities. And if you're at home online, it will give you an opportunity to explore some of our environments as well. So if you go onto our website at earlyexcellence.com, and if you look at the Ideas and Inspirations tab, on there you will see a virtual classroom and you'll be able to go on a tour of our settings as well. But lastly, I just want to thank you all for coming and thank you for those joining us online. It's been really lovely to see you today. Thank you. If you do want to grab another drink, please do.